Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's review, we are taking a look at the newest mid-range in Prodigy's lineup, made in collaboration with world champion Isaac Robinson. That's right, today we're taking a look at the archive. As per usual, let's jump on in by taking a look at the profile and discussing the feel of the archive. Now, being a mid-range, it has a very blunt nose to it. It has a decently high shoulder and then a very slight dome. I wouldn't call it pop top and I wouldn't call it flat. It just has a nice, just gradual dome to it. And the difference between, say, the 500 and then the 400 plastic, the 500 just had a smidge, just ever so slightly more dome in the middle of the flight plate. And it's also worth noting, I was pleasantly surprised that the bottom of the rim was a little bit more rounded, not as sharp as a lot of other Prodigy's molds. That's probably my #1 complaint, is how sharp they can be on the bottom of the rim. It was a bit more smoothed out on both the 4 and 500 plastics, so it felt very comfortable both backhand and also comfortable for forehand, as it didn't feel like it was digging into my hand. Alright, so how does the archive fly? Well, as with all discs, it's going to depend on form, it's going to depend on your arm speed. For the majority of players with medium to slower arms, this is going to be just a very straight flying mid-range that can handle a decent amount of torque. And then in the last 20-25% of the flight, that's when you're going to notice a very predictable finish. And then for you very fast arms that can overcome the natural resistance to torque that the archive has, this is going to be a good hyzer flipping disc that's going to ride dead straight down tunnels with maybe a baby fade at the very end. But then when thrown flat or slight anhyzer, it's going to just hold nice gentle turns or controlled turnover shots. So what would be the best uses for the archive? Well, if you're in the woods, because it has enough workability in that mid-flight, it's torque resistant, but you can work it in the mid-flight depending on your arm speed and the angle of release. It is perfect for those flex shots because it has great late stability as well in the way to fight out of those turnover angles. As even as you're seeing here, it does check up and it will fight its way back. So it's perfect if you need to flex around an obstacle, but then also if you need to match an S-curving fairway shot. The archive can also be a dependable option for a mid-range when it comes to windy days. Now, it's not going to be able to handle those very windy days, but for those general 5-10 mile an hour days, you're not going to see that much of a difference in the flight of the archive. It's also worth noting that even though it is semi-overstable, it does have a great amount of glide to it. So if you have a lot of airspace, you can get some really good distance out of the archive. And even if you do, say, have a low ceiling, because it does like to kind of float, hover in the air just a little bit longer than other semi-overstable mid-ranges. So even if you have a low ceiling, you don't have to worry about sacrificing too much distance. Now, when it just comes to backhand versus forehand, backhand shots, it's going to hold the line that you put it on. I mean, you put it on a steep anhyzer line, yeah, it's going to hold it all the way to the ground. Versus if you give it air and room to work, you're gonna have really nice flexing shots. But then just in general, you throw it flat hard, it's gonna ride out so straight and then just a little bit of fade at the very end. I just love that style of flight. Forehand, you do have to kind of watch with your power a little bit depending on how fast or how much torque you get on your forehands. Once I start throwing this at near full power with forehand, you can see that I get very effortless flex shots. So since it's not insanely overstable, I'll keep it about 60% power on a hyzer for just those touch approaches. Now let's go ahead, take a look at the archive out on the course. This hole, you've got trouble on the right-hand side, and it's an island green. Being a lefty, I have all the space on the left-hand side. For righty, you probably have to just kind of throw something straight down the middle, which again, depending on your power level, is going to be great for the archive. For me, I can just swing it out wide and just let that natural overstability and gravity do all the work. Now this is definitely a much more difficult hole. You have a narrow fairway and a lot of trees on both sides. So for a lefty, I'm going to want something on a slight flex, so just keep it on a little bit of an anhyzer line to start. Let it hold that angle down the fairway before it slows down and then hyzers out. Now this next approach shot is just a stock hyzer, and this is where I like just keeping the archive on that hyzer angle at about 50 to 60% power on a forehand. You do have some trees to miss and you have to split the goalposts in order to hit the correct line. Again, just throw it 50-60% flat, a little bit of hyzer, and just let it work back to the basket. So we've seen what the 400 can do, but how does it compare to the 500 plastic? Well, in terms of feel, the 500 is just a little bit slicker than the 400, so it'll take a little bit more time breaking in. And then also, I think the 500 is maybe just a little bit more durable as well. And when it comes to the flight, I didn't notice too much difference. I do think that the 500 is just a little bit more torque resistant, I mean just ever so barely. So I do prefer it on forehands, and then when it comes to backhand, they do fly very similar, but I think it just starts to hyzer out just a little bit sooner than the 400 counterpart. Now when it comes to the Lefty lines, I wanted to see how does the Archive stack up against other straight to semi-overstable mid-ranges that are out on the market today. Now with the Archive, as you see, it is very straight for the majority of its flight, and then just as it slows down, it has that nice predictable finish. And then against an EMAC Truth, this is in Lucid X plastic, which is kind of more on the overstable side for an EMAC Truth. Very similar flight, a little bit of turn in the mid-flight, but then still has a really nice strong finish. And then the Rock 3. I think the Rock 3 really mirrors the Archive very well. It rides out very straight and then just has a really nice predictable finish. And then you have probably the most overstable of the bunch, and that is the Discraft Buzz, arguably the best mid-range out there. Now I say arguably because if you've been following the channel, you know that the Buzz and I, we just don't jive very well. But overall, I think the Archive is a great addition to the market in this slot. Very straight, with a good fade, very dependable, but still workable again in that mid-flight. So that way, if you're in the woods, you can work it on a lot of different lines. If you're on a wide open course, you can just throw it just a little bit off to the side of the basket and just let it hyzer back in. Very point and shoot. Very trustworthy, even in the wind. Good amount of glide, so you can still get decent amount of distance with this. It's just overall, the Archive is very, very good. It even feels good in the hand, both backhand and forehand. So there's not really too much to nitpick about what I don't like about it, because even the flashing issues, which is usually known with Prodigy, they're not necessarily there. So this fixes a lot of those issues as well. So I hope all of you enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe. Also visit GreatLakesDisc.com. Pick up your Archive today. Use promo code Lefty. Till next time, everyone, keep banging them chains.